One of the biggest problems that violinists have is that we don't know enough about how the instrument works, how to take care of it properly, how to change the strings properly to prolong the life of the string, and just various other topics that one would think requires a 6-month course on the physics of violin, but it's not the case. What I'm going to do today is present a complete guide on all these topics, and I have a special guest that I'm going to be visiting. His name is Andrew Ryan, and he's one of the world's greatest violin makers, in my opinion. I'm lucky enough to play on one of his violins for many years now. And Andrew is very passionate about teaching violinists all of these things without oversaturating them with information. So we're here in sunny Providence, and we're walking to his workshop now. I'm looking forward to learning a lot, and I hope you do as well.
Hey Daniel, how you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Come on in.
Oh, hi. Chester wants to say hi.
Chester,
Hey, Chester.
Say hi to Daniel.
It's the workshop assistant. I'm here with Andrew Ryan, a violin maker. He graduated from the violin making school in Salt Lake City. And after that, he headed the Rooney & Son violin shop in Boston for many years, which is a great shop. And ever since 2011, he's been making violins exclusively and dealing with some of the world's greatest instruments. And we're here in his sanctuary where all the magic happens.
Or the tragic, depending on the day.
The tragic or the magic.
Today we're going to look over Daniel's instrument and some other instruments and give you a general guide as to how to take care of your own instrument, some of the most common problems and their solutions.
Make sure you leave any comments or questions down below, because Andrew and I will both be checking the video, and we're happy to respond to any questions you have.
It's important when you're handing the instrument to someone that you present it to them in a way that is natural to them to hold it properly. So you want to present it to their left hand, just like so that they can take it with the left hand, and you hold the at the end button. You don't want to give them a cross purpose, for instance. Exactly.
Take this.
The most important is not to hold the instrument by the body itself.
Yeah.
That you can easily squeeze it, crack it. The sweat from your hands will get on the varnish.
Mine's when Heifetz takes the violin out. You always grab the fingerboard.
That's definitely
just like school.
Once more.
I think it was Ziggity who used to walk around, or maybe it was Chrysler who used to walk around with it.
Oh yeah,
on one peg.
If you're like me and you like trying all kinds of shoulder rests and chin rests, be careful when you adjust them. Because, for example, at the lowest height, this particular shoulder rest actually scratched my violin. And you could see the damage here and the subsequent leather pads that I attached to the feet so that it wouldn't damage the instrument again.
So the first step in maintaining your instrument is how to keep it clean on a daily basis. So the things that accumulate daily are sweat and sort of general grime from your hands and from your neck, and rosin. It's important to keep your hands clean, so wash your hands before you play.
Sit. Good boy.
Cleaning off rosin, there's a couple of approaches that one can take. You can have a micro cleaning cloth like Daniel has here. I like the Kleenex because it's smooth, so it's not going to scratch the surface, but it has a kind of open texture to it that will absorb the rosin and dirt and things like that. The advantage of using the disposable paper first is that you're going to get the majority of
the big gunk.
The big gunk away.
Yeah.
And then use your cleaning cloth that will both keep the cleaning cloth cleaner, because basically you don't want to clean the instrument by putting stuff back on it.
If you clean the strings, I see a lot of people doing this, and then like rub the wood.
Right.
Rosin has these little crystalline structures, and it could damage the varnish.
And it's sticky.
It's like the towels that butt face.
You can rest the instrument here and sort of, now you have 3 points. It's very secure.
Okay, good. Yes.
Wipe down your instrument very carefully. Getting underneath the bridge is most important, and under the fingerboard. If there's something that you want to remove, the best thing for cleaning is a little spit. There's enzymes in the saliva that will break down dirt. This is used a lot in restoration work of paintings and sculpture and all sorts of art.
It'll also heal your wounds. Oh, it's been a dog.
Oh, that's a dog. That's it. Yeah.
Chester?
Don't let your dog lick your violin. If you want, you can also take a Q-tip. So you can just take the Q-tip, wet it, and just rub that little spot, and then dry it off. Again, don't scrub with the Q-tip. It's just meant to take a little bit away, but it's an excellent way to clean your instrument without using any chemicals or any cleaning products. You really don't want to put any commercial polishes and things like that on your instrument, especially things that contain oils. The oils can get in the wood and into the cracks.
Resist all of the fancy marketing.
Yes.
Certain online shops trying to sell you cleaner and
Yeah.
polish.
Yeah. If your violin is really dirty and needs to be cleaned, visit your violin maker.
Yeah.
They have the proper chemicals and materials to clean the instrument. You're a good boy. Why don't you go, why don't you go get in your bed, okay? The strings wear out principally because the oils from your finger and the skin cells, it doesn't sound pleasant, but fill up the space in the winding and dampen the string. This causes the string to become duller sounding. This is one reason to keep the strings clean, but eventually the string will wear out because you can't really clean the space between the windings. Remove that rosin daily. So we talked about using some sort of paper towel or a Kleenex or something like that to get the initial build up. But then you want to clean the string itself a little more than that. In a violin shop, we often use alcohol to clean the strings. But the danger of using alcohol to clean the strings is that if you get a drop on the instrument, it's going to eat into the varnish. It's a disaster waiting to happen. So a more convenient and a safer way is to actually abrade the rosin a little bit. So if we initially use the paper towel, we rub off. And then there's another product which is essentially synthetic steel wool. It's a plastic. Goes under different names like Scotch-Brite. The finer grades are great for cleaning off the strings. Just pinch it onto the string, and you can hear that the string is getting clean because it's not squeaking anymore. So that means that the rosin is off.
And unlike steel wool, that's nice because you don't have to be as careful, because the abrasion is not such that it'll damage the string.
Exactly, it's much finer, and it doesn't shed any steel.
Right.
If you're overly aggressive with the string, over time you're going to damage the string because you are taking probably a little bit of metal off of the string as you're taking some rosin. You go straight to Daniel's rag, which is very good, like a micro.
Call me for this.
Or I like to use a vacuum cleaner filter. It's a woven plastic, but it has
Very soft.
Very soft. It will gather up that last bit of rosin and anything that's on there. It's just a nice, and you can rub down your fingerboard with it. You can do the same thing with the Scotch-Brite if you want to get underneath the fingerboard, get it underneath the strings onto the fingerboard. You can use that as well. pinch the strings one at a time. We want to keep the tension on the instrument. I'll loosen the E string a little bit. The E string can break often if it's a high tension string. And you take the G string off, the tension of the E string will go up. You just want to lower it, quarter step, not very much. So let's take off the G string. This is a good time to dope the peg. You want to see how it's turning in the hole. How do pegs work? It's essentially a wedge. It's a round wedge, but it's a wedge. And when you push it into the hole, it becomes tighter. To do this, it's really important that the peg is round and that the taper is even on both sides. The way we can see whether the taper is even is how shiny the two sides are. It should basically be the same amount of gloss. It means it's bearing equally. If one side was very, very shiny and the other side was dull, that would mean that it's all bearing on one side rather than the other. The other thing we want to look for is that it's shiny all the way around. If you see shiny spots and then a dull spot, shiny spot and a dull spot, it means it is not concentric. Need to have it reshaped by the violin maker. It's smooth, but it has a little creak in it. So we're going to want to put a little bit of peg dope on this. The peg dope, it does not make the peg stickier. It actually lubricates the peg so that you can push it into the hole more easily. So it's a bit like you put oil on a nut so that it turns tighter on the screw and it's more secure. So it's the same thing here. Don't need to overdo it. A little smear. That should be sufficient. And you can put more peg dope on the lower strings than the higher strings. Now you can hear that it doesn't creak anymore. Now we can get our string out. Before I put the string on, I put a little bit of pencil lead into the groove, make it smooth. Same thing at the bridge end. I'll rub a little pencil lead into the groove. We put the ball end of the string into the slot. And I usually orient the string in the direction that it's wound. Put about that much out. You'll see why we have it that way. As we turn the peg, we go on the outside of that little stub, away from the head of the peg. We come around, and then we cross over before we get to that stub. This is a sort of clove hitch. It's going to secure the string on the peg. As the tension of the string increases, it pulls down on that and cinches down on it and keeps the string from slipping on the peg.
While you're restringing the violin, make sure that none of the strings cross each other in the peg box. And likewise, make sure the path of the string is as straight as possible. You don't want the string to be going, and then after it hits the nut, it goes in another direction.
Once you've gotten the string on, you want to wipe the string down. There is a coating on the string that we want to remove. And we want to warm the string up enough so that it stretches. And we do that by taking a piece of paper towel and sort of pinch the string between your fingers and just rub up and down. This allows the synthetic core to stretch a little bit, and we also are making the winding more uniform on the string. So bring it up to pitch, do the same thing again. We're going to do this 4 or 5 times. When we tune, we want the peg to be in a comfortable place. When it's too far horizontal like this, it's hard for us to get our hand around it. So this is why I leave the extra bit sticking out when we started, and I'm going to show you how to adjust this. So we want to bring this peg to be more vertical. We're going to loosen the string. So we get to here, we're going to pull a little bit of the string, and then we're going to rewrap it. And that's where we want it to be. Now, once you've done that, rest the instrument sort of in your lap, between your knees, so it's secure. Don't squeeze too hard. You just want to make sure that it's not sliding around. Rest your hand on the seat out, not on the body. You want to rest your hand on the edge of the instrument here. We want to lift the string out of the groove and place it back in. This will equalize the tension on both sides of the bridge. You also want to make sure your bridge stays straight as you're bringing the strings up to pitch. And the way you want to do that is rest the instrument between your knees like this, in your lap between the knees, and you rest your hands on the corners, and then using your fingertips only, you can pull the bridge backward or forward to the right place. It doesn't take very much, so you want to go very small increments here of adjustment, and don't have your hands like this. It's very easy to push the bridge over, so you want to just use your fingertips to do this, and make sure your hands are resting on the instrument here like that. Okay. The back side of the bridge should be approximately 90 degrees to the flat surface of the violin. The back side of the bridge itself should be flat. So just make sure it's not bending over this way or bending over backwards. That's what you want to do. Well, we're not going to the post office. Okay? We'll go later. I know. Violin bridges are fit specifically to each instrument. They come as a blank, like this, but then the feet of the bridge must be fit to match the contour of the top, and then the curvature of the top matched to the angle of the fingerboard, so that the strings are sitting above the fingerboard at the correct height, and that they lie in a circle that makes it easy to play. The top of the bridge is matched to a template that has the correct curvature. But once it's put on the instrument, we need to correct the height of each string so that they sit in an arc. And that can change based on the different diameters of the strings. So, for instance, if you use a silver D, that's a thinner string than an aluminum D. And the way we test that curvature, it's a little stick with a notch in it that we rock back and forth to see how much play there is. So when I put it on the D string here, you can see there's very little rock. When I put it on the A string, we can see that there's much more rock. So that's telling me that the A string is a little bit high compared to the other strings. So we'll need to adjust that with a file. And they're pretty much equal now. That the strings sit in this arc is much more important than the radius of that arc. Every violin bridge should have a parchment under the E string. This protects the bridge. The E string is quite a fine piece of steel wire, and will cut down into the soft maple. Parchment is a small piece of leather that will glue onto the bridge. Parchment is softened with a little bit of moisture and then glued in place. And we put more glue on it. And we bend it over the bridge. The most common type is a nylon tailgut. It's threaded and has these nuts on each end, which are underneath the tailpiece. They run into two small holes and into the tailpiece. They can slip. These threads can give way, so you want to just make sure that it's in good shape. Another type of tailgut is made from twisted steel, roped steel, or roped Kevlar. These are stronger. They tend to make the instrument more wolfy or more reactive, we'll say. Nylon is more flexible, a little warmer sounding. From time to time, you'll want to put a little lubricant on the threads of your E-tuner and make sure the end of the tuner is not mushroomed over. So we just put that little bit of grease in there. You'll want to inspect the bridge of the tailpiece, this little piece of wood that runs across the tailpiece. It can come loose sometimes and cause buzzing. bass bar is a beam that sits inside the top of the violin, runs its length. It supports the top from collapsing. That's one of its attributes. The other is it controls how stiff the top is. So a stiffer bar will make a brighter sounding instrument. A less stiff bar will make a darker sounding instrument. The Soundpost, which sits on the other side, opposite the bass bar, so on this side, it supports the top from collapsing on the treble side, but more importantly, it controls how the top bends. Much the way, if you have a seesaw, you control where the pivot point is to make it so it's balanced to a big person at one end and a little person at the other end. We move that pivot point so that it's perfectly balanced. That's the function of the Soundpost.
Soul of the violin.
The soul of the violin, because when it's in the wrong place, there's no sound to the violin. When it's in the right place, it releases the voice of the violin.
And the adjustments are so small, right? It could be like millimeters, it can be like...
It's tenths of millimeters. We actually
just tap it.
Yeah, we talk about clicks. You know,
Clicks.
just click. It can make all the difference because it's about the position of the Soundpost.
Yeah.
Yes, the Soundpost has to fit perfectly, but that's kind of a given. It's like playing in tune and playing the right rhythm. Then you make music after that. So finding the right position of the Soundpost is really the secret to adjusting an instrument. Supposedly Misha Elman had his own Soundpost setter and would endlessly pursue finding the right adjustment. The sweet spot for the Soundpost isn't really based on the player's preference.
It's technical.
It's a technical. So the seam is the join between the sides of the instrument and the top or back. They are glued together with a glue called hide glue, Chester. Hide glue, which is made from skins, animal skins, is sensitive to humidity. So here at the chin rest, up here where the hand goes, are very common places to open up. And it often can be characterized by, you hear some sort of buzzing sound where the sound is fuzzy, it's not responding the way it normally does. Sometimes you can just sort of tap around the edge of the
You can
instrument.
reproduce that buzz.
You can hear it go clack, 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 instead of, like, if I tap right now, it's just sounds like
Yeah, there's a solidity.
there's a solidity.
I think just in general, speaking of buzzing, I'm very often I hear some kind of buzzing, and then I have to go through a few steps of like, okay, what could it be?
Right.
'Cause it might be the seam, but it could be other things. So just the things that I look for. So first, the E fine tuner. Very often you'll hear some buzzing if it's totally loosened. First order of business, check that the fine tuner is actually like they're tightened to some degree. The next thing I would check is if you're wearing something that has a zipper and it touches the instrument when you play, it can actually cause buzzing when you're playing. Once this happened to me and I couldn't figure out what's wrong with my violin. It was, I had a little sweater with a zipper.
Yeah.
You'll also want to keep an eye on the winding of the string. If it starts to unravel like this, you'll experience poor response from the instrument and the sound will overall be dirtier. So that's a good time to change the string out.
So the purfling is this little inlay around the edge of the instrument. So it's an inlay that maybe goes a millimeter deep, and it's 3 strips of wood. So sometimes some glue needs to be put into that to prevent buzzing as well. Another place for buzzing can be the nut. As it gets worn by the strings running over it, the front edge of it can become rounded, and the string can actually buzz in that unshaped channel. So as you play, the fingerboard can become worn out, and a little sort of channel underneath the string can develop, as well as ridges where your fingers are touching. And then you'll notice, the sound is not clear anymore, and why is this? Is kind of buzzing when I play some specific note, which is more worn. It may be in a little trough. It's almost like a fret. The violin maker will be able to plane that fingerboard smooth and sand it smooth again, and all will be good.
You can sort of check that, right? Like if you look down the fingerboard this way,
Yep.
and you try, you can have like a light that's shining on the fingerboard, and you can kind of see the reflection. Is it straight, or do you see any bumps?
Yeah. You can sort of pull the string aside as well to see if there's a trough running under the string. Sometimes Daniel doesn't have them on his pegs, but there's can be a little inlay here of a pip, a little separate piece of wood that is glued onto the end of the peg. Sometimes those can come loose, as well as the collar of the peg can be a separate piece of wood that is turned, and those can come loose, and they need to be glued from time to time.
We're still gluing wood. It's 2021.
Yeah, that's right. That's the miraculous thing about the violin. Everything is glued together but can be repaired and taken apart and re-glued. The most common area for cracks to develop are along the saddle. So this is the saddle, this little piece of ebony at the end of the violin. There's an inherent weakness at the edges of that. So often you get a crack here on the other side. And the same thing up here next to the neck. You can get cracks that develop there. The next most common is to have a Soundpost crack. There's 27 kilograms of pressure from the strings onto the top of the instrument. The whole top is sort of folding around the Soundpost, and if the instrument gets banged or something happens, you can get a crack there. You can also get cracks along the, we call them wing cracks. There's this thin space between the eye of the F-hole and the edge. It's a good topic to talk about humidity. There's a danger of trying to over-humidify or over-dry. So if you live someplace that's very moist, to try and think, oh, I've got to get the moisture down to 30% or something like that. No. What you should aim for is just a general temperate quality. So if you live someplace humid, just try to back some of that humidity off. Or if you live someplace dry, try to add some humidity. Not trying to correct for the excess of humidity or dryness, thinking that it has to be some ideal humidity. You just want to keep things temperate and not to change quickly. The instrument will adapt to summer to winter, but if you are in your apartment and it's 72 degrees and you've got the steam radiator going, and then you go outside and it's 30 degrees.
And you leave the violin in your trunk.
And you leave the
go
violin
shopping.
Yes, that's the problem.
It's important to develop a very good flow between yourself as a musician and the luthier. So that can mean everything from, not just playing endlessly without any purpose, not practicing your piece. Like, you should have an intention. Try to identify what you think the problem might be. So you play something on the G, and maybe the G is the problem, and hand it back. And then this kind of back and forth has to be very efficient, because it's very easy to get fatigued. Just being sensitive and developing a good flow, and this is like something I tried to do with Andrew, and probably fail miserably at.
It's very important to be specific about what you're trying to adjust. I like to focus on the worst thing. Yeah. Say, okay, it's not speaking, it's not balanced. You try to pick the low-hanging fruit, as it were. The thing that is most obviously out of adjustment. Yeah,
and importantly also just getting to know the vocabulary, like how to express what you think. I mean, it shouldn't be like wine tasting. It doesn't, but just understanding like the basic vocabulary of balance, of response, open, closed, these different qualities of sound. And your luthier will help you with that, because he or she will have that vocabulary. And you as a musician, you bring another piece of the puzzle to it. So, so why don't we get the fiddle and try a few things out?
Okay, Chester, lie down. That's a good point. That's what you want to do. When adjusting instruments, I like to think about tonal centers of the instrument. So the Soundpost is controlling the lowest modes of the violin, the lowest body modes, which are the top and the back coupled together. So we're using the Soundpost to make those coupled plates, like on the seesaw, to be balanced. In physics, you might call it that they're in phase, or that everything, the motions are all moving together forward. That's when we get the most sound.
Less interference.
Less interference, exactly. There's less destruction between the plates. So I like to think about two tonal centers. The classic one that people adjust the Soundpost for is the wolf note. So things around the note C, but there's also a secondary wolf note. We'll say notes around the note A. You don't hear that one so much because the back is much heavier than the top. The top is the one that's producing the note around C, and the back is the one that's producing the note around the A.
And to my understanding, Strads and Guarneri's, like typically the different models sometimes tend towards a different wolf note, or is that?
They can. In general, Stradivarius are thinner, lighter, pushed to the edge of the materials more than Guarneri's.
So, in terms of the C wolf,
So it's a little unstable.
a little bit unstable.
So we're going to this is the Soundpost setter. It's a tool. At one end, it has a little, a spear for when we put the Soundpost into the violin. So we have a little spear that we can put it on, and we put it inside the violin. And on the other end, it has these little recesses for pushing the Soundpost with that end or pulling it. That's what I just did inside. I just pushed the Soundpost a little bit. And we're going to see if any miracles happen.
Yeah, what I notice is that I don't have to be as careful and scared of where I bow, how much pressure, and how much weight.
You want it to almost be wolfy because when it's behaving like that, meaning you want a big amplitude to that note, it means the rest of the instrument is going to be open and big sounding.
Mm-hmm.
We can make a violin that has absolutely no wolves in it, but it's probably not going to have much sound to it either. The two go hand in hand.
What sort of adjustment would you make, let's say, if like the E string was too shrill or the E string was too fluffy and like lacked clarity?
So often we move the post closer or farther away from the bridge, which generally, the closer to the bridge, the harder the sound is, the more focused the sound is. So often if the A and E string are too bright or too sort of kind of just hard sounding and not flexible enough, it's usually because the post is too close and you can move it a little farther away. Usually the rule of thumb for the Soundpost is that it is half of its diameter behind the bridge. So
exactly.
Soundpost is usually about 6.5 millimeters, and it's usually about 3 millimeters behind the bridge. So it goes back to the lever idea. So the bridge is the force, the Soundpost is the fulcrum. So if we have a far distance between the bridge and the Soundpost, it's like a long lever.
Yeah.
So the violin is going to feel very loose and easy to play. If it's up close, it's like a very short lever. It's going to be stiff. It's going to be harder to move it. And so like if we pluck your A string, it rings, it's open, it's clear sounding. I have a violin here that I think needs an adjustment on the A string, and you can pluck that A string, pluck your A string. So here that's clear and open, and we hear this one, you hear how it's kind of retracts, it's closed sounding. It doesn't so the ring doesn't bloom out, it kind of contracts in on itself. So we're going to make an adjustment to this violin to correct that. So you play a little bit on that. I'm just using the mirror to see where the Soundpost is. Now, so if we pluck that A string,
Oh, it's like more resonant.
yeah,
Wow.
so it rings, it's clear, it sustains its sound. So that's what we talked about, the destructive interference. So that's what's going on.
Yeah, the A is beefier,
Yeah.
and it's a little more open on the A string.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
C is a bit better too. When there's an adjustment on the instrument, I sometimes find myself playing differently. When something responds
Yes.
more like I'm expecting it to respond, or just more easily,
Yeah.
I adjust my playing. As a player, I'm not perfectly consistent, and my ear is sensitive, but I might be deceived.
Right.
And someone like you just knows certain technical things that are not susceptible
Right.
to a lot of the kind of confusion.
Yeah.
And I have this all the time, so I think it's normal for musicians.
And when it's adjusted well, when you actually get it mechanically working well, the adjustment should hold year round. It's only when the adjustment is poor and you get a big change in the humidity or the climate, and then it's just unplayable.
Amplifies it.
Yeah, it amplifies it. I think it's very helpful that players understand what's going on with their instrument, and the maker gets to know the instrument and the player, which is important to develop that history, to know what changes you've made to the instrument over the years, how you've adjusted it, the preferences. That's Aladdin.
I can show you the world. No, it's actually I can show. There's some half diminished chords. A whole new world. And then you play. It's the same music.
Is there a Brahms interval? Well, there's always a half step. There's always
There's a half
like
step.
the upward half step or downward half step, like as a reach. And like I always think how Mozart is like.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna pixelate this part. Like a secret work happening. So that's all for today's video. I've certainly learned a lot, and I hope you have as well. You can find Andrew's website and his Instagram. Do check out his Instagram. He's posting a lot of cool things there. So I'll leave all those links in the description. So see you all next time, and thanks for watching. Bye.
Thanks.